It's go time.
Welcome to the Third Down Gamble podcast with your hosts, Don Charbin and Heath Graham.
Two weeks of Canadian football, and again, the last 3 minutes is meaning everything, it seems, to who's going to win the game. We've had some great finishes. One of my sort of bits that I chomp at all the time is that 35-second clock. Now, having been in stadium at Regina to watch the game, and you could see the game clock and that return to play clock or return to scrimmage clock sitting right beside it, so you could see them side by side. Routinely, it would take 10 seconds for that 35-second clock to kick in after the play was over. There'd be the whistle. I'd gaze my eye to my right to see the scoreboard. I see it marching down. Even though in game stats, they have noted that the actual number of plays per game is decent so far, but I am concerned.
That was one of the big questions regarding the 35-second clock. We talked about it having been to the preseason game in Saskatoon to see it in action and noticed a distinct pause between the whistle and that 35-second clock ringing in. Interesting to hear your thoughts being in stadium to see it in game action during the regular season as well. I did record all three games on PVR and was watching some of them back. And I've talked about this when we were dissecting the 20-second clock in seasons past, how that 30-second skip button on the remote was your best friend when reviewing a game. Oftentimes, with that 30-second skip, you hear the whistle, you hit that 30-second skip. Ideally, they should be in the last 5-6 seconds of the 35-second clock, ready to snap the ball. There was oftentimes a larger gap than that. The one team I will say that moved very quickly was the Toronto Argonauts. Oftentimes during their game, they were snapping within 30 seconds of the previous whistle.
In the Winnipeg game, they were down versus Hamilton. They were down at 140 plays. Now, Winnipeg is notorious for milking the clock as much as they can. That's one of the things they do. Mike O'Shea stated categorically a couple of years ago, he wants to shorten the game. How do you shorten it? By having fewer plays. And the NFL, everyone says, well, they've got a 40-second clock. How does that equate? I did some research, checked into it. That 40-second clock for the NFL starts the moment that previous play is done. And they're not necessarily in the booth waiting for that whistle. They're hitting that button as soon as that play looks like it's cessated or stopped. And then you go to that next snap, you've got your clock already running. In the CFL, they've decided, I'm guessing maybe some pushback from coaches, they decided that until the ball is marked, essentially, that is when that clock will start. And that could take, it seems weird, but it always takes longer when they're unpiling right when they made a 1-yard gain than if they made a 25-yard gain. Easily, that 35-second clock is a misnomer. It is no better, no worse than what was. If it was going to be better, then we should have seen at 160 game that we saw last weekend where the Edmonton and Ottawa played 160 plays in that football game. That should be the norm or the low. We're nowhere near there.
This was the danger of this 35-second clock, was the creep of wasted time continuing. I hope the league gets better at it. I hope for the sake of fans watching the game that we do see a more rigid interpretation of that 35-second clock to keep things moving, as you said, to get more plays in and increase the entertainment value.
That's the thing that everybody wants to see. The high of the past weekend was Montreal versus Toronto, 154, which you obviously saw Toronto doing the hurry up. You go to Winnipeg, it went down to 140, and Saskatchewan, BC, two high-octane offenses. They put up a lot of points, but still only 145 plays. That's not getting us anywhere, and as much as they said it's going to provide more flow, more rapidity, it's not. It's doing the exact same thing, the old 20-second clock. The only thing they've changed is taking the whistle away from the officials, although Justin McInnes in that football game reset the 35-second clock at one point because of a mix-up on the field, played it out completely. That would have been a 70-second opportunity to put the ball back in play. There's no circumstance where you should have to reset the 35-second clock.
There has been some activity on social media from CFL fans also asking why the 35-second clock isn't visible on the TV broadcast. And I think that raises a good point as well. If you want to show the positives of this, have it in your scorebug so people can see it, people can monitor it. Football fans are smart people. We've been watching this game, a lot of us, for many, many years. As I said, things like a 30-second skip or your own eyes are watching the game clock tick down. You realize that the 35-second clock is a bit of a misnomer right now. I say put it up on the broadcast, let people outside of the stadium see it as well. There will be more noise about it as they continue to mismanage it. And I hope that will push them towards, as I said, a more rigid and consistent 35-second clock.
The 35, yes, it does kick in, but it kicks in when? And that's the problem. In the NFL, when that 40-second clock kicks in, it's right at the end of the previous play. In the CFL, it could be anywhere from 3, which is very rare, 5, which is most likely, or 10 seconds, which is quite common as well. That's a 45-second clock. You tell me that's faster than the NFL and what they're doing?
I've seen you. I know you can count to 35. I'm pretty confident in that. I'm glad to hear your observations of it. We hopefully will be in some other stadiums throughout this year as well. I know I'm going to be at a game in Hamilton in a couple of weeks' time as well. So something to watch in game and in stadium to see how this progresses.
From the moment you introduce it, flat out say, as soon as the previous play is over, that 35-second clock kicks in. Away you go. Don't care what you're doing on the field. Don't care where you are on the field. Don't care if it's a field goal attempt, a punt. You got 35 seconds to get that thing done from the moment that previous play ended. Teams would have coached up, figured it out, got it going. But instead, and I don't know who pushed, but I'm certain that coaches said, wait, we don't want to be rushed that much. And they're going to defend their turf as much as possible. But why would you relent? If you really want more action, a faster pace to this football game, then put it right at the end of the previous play, 35 seconds from there. This, to me, is just a fail right now because we're still averaging 149 plays. This is over the first 2 weekends, 149 plays. Now, that's the high of 160 Edmonton-Ottawa game, a low of 138. Ugh. If you look at this and look at it comparatively, it's still less than what it was 10 years ago. And that is a major problem. Now, the CFL could point and say, but scoring is up, and we'll get to that. We've seen for a couple of years now that after field goals, single points, that the ball comes out to the 40-yard line. And I understand, and Steve Daniel definitely illustrated why that rationale followed, because if you take the field and you break it into 10-yard chunks, the further away you get, your probability of scoring gets less and less. So the difference between being at the 30 is probably 5 to 7% less of a chance of scoring than being at the 40, which is still a few percentage point less than starting at the 50. The logic is totally there. In terms of a rationale on another level, the CFL, when they produce their analysis of the statistics and what the game has provided, is that we're finding out that the average starting point after a kickoff is the 34. So why are they getting the bonus 5 yards? If you just look at how the game flow is, and even with kickers being back at their 30, they're booming kickoffs now at an average of about 68 yards or something like this. Why are we going to the 40 after these plays? Why not start at the 35?
That would make a lot more sense if that's what the average dictates. Yes, to have an average, there has to be higher and lower, which means that you've got an excellent return game if you're starting beyond the 35 to 34 yard line after receiving a kick. That's other explosion plays and excitement plays we want to see. And we've got a great bunch of return guys in the league led by Janarian Grant and Trey Vauvel that can explode on any given kick to bust it for an extra 10, 15 yards, give you that great field position and a starting point. I agree. I believe the 40-yard line is too generous of a starting point. The fact that essentially, other than a kickoff, everything comes out to the 40 just doesn't seem right to me.
I know that there's some talk about, well, it's player safety because they don't want as many kick returns. So naturally, you're going to choose the 40-yard line over trying to run back a kickoff. When kickoffs, and this average, if you go back to and the stats that they provide are back to 2018, this is about an 8-year average. They hover right around 35 the whole time. Like it just, the needle moves up a couple yards and moves down a couple yards. It never really sways. So logically, the 35 would be the most likely point of origin for the next drive. And the other thing too, and this is something that I think I've elocuted here, maybe I haven't, the 40-yard line is kind of a huge reward for failure. You just gave up points. The reason why you're there, at least until this year, it was because you gave up points. So why are we patting you on the head saying, well, I'm sorry, how about we move you up here and make it fair?
As much as people talk about rewarding points for failure with the original rules of the Rouge with punts and missed field goals going through for one, you're right. The argument that you were rewarding failure there, now you're rewarding failure the other way by being very generous on where your team is now starting on offense.
They said that the decision zone, the area that you've got to decide to go forward, you've got to pretty much gamble because it just doesn't make any sense to do anything else, is part and parcel of this new 2027. So I was wondering how it was going to play out in 2026. When teams get deep, what do? Well, the Rough Riders were at the 8-yard line. They kicked a field goal, knowing that BC would get the ball at the 40. The BC Lions kicked a 25-yard field goal. They were inside the 20. That means the last scrimmage. They gave up the ball back at the 40 after the made field goal. Teams still will take points over worrying about that 40-yard line.
They will, and that's the trade-off. That's, I also believe, a 12-yard field goal. I want to say Mark Leggio perhaps kicked a 12-yard field goal for the Hamilton Tiger Cats. And that was a little bit of scoreboard management as well, I think, of just making sure you take the points, extend the lead to a 2-score game. You're right, going for it on third down in some of those situations. If you're successful, you get a first down or touchdown, moving the ball forward. If you don't, you are pinning the other team inside their own 10 and in some cases inside their own 5.
Old habits die hard. Let's face it. Coaches want to score. That's the reason why you got that far. And do you risk it? And 3rd and 2 seems to be the cutoff. That's where teams will probably think more about it. But anything 2 1/4, 2 1/2, beyond that, nope, it's field goal unit. And I don't care if I'm sitting at the 3-yard line. I am going to kick a field goal.
Sometimes what the data shows doesn't sink in with the head coaches. And a couple of other examples of this, the stats show that you should go for 2-point conversions on every touchdown, that on average, you will end up scoring more points in the game than if you go for a single. The other one is in overtime. It shows that the team that gets the ball first often wins, more often than not wins the game. However, coaches want to get the ball second so they can see what the other team does. A little bit counterintuitive given what the data shows.
Go back to the Grey Cup between Winnipeg and Hamilton. Hamilton deferred, wanted the ball second. What did they do? They got down to 3rd and 10 because they were in big trouble and they were stuffed through an interception. Concede that Montreal got a fumble off of Hamilton, and by going second, it worked out for them. But 6 out of 10, even a little bit more than that, 6.5 out of 10, if you get the ball first, you're winning in overtime. And coaches don't get paid for taking wild risks. They get paid for winning. And if that 3 points is going to be the difference in their mind to a result, they are going to take it.
Hi, I'm Adam Rita. We're listening to the Third Down Podcast.
Scoring is up, and for the first time since 1995, we have 4 400-yard quarterbacks in the same weekend. That 1995 stat is a bit skewed. There were 7 games and 14 starting quarterbacks in 1995 due to U.S. expansion. This past weekend, there was only 3 games, so 6 starting quarterbacks, 4 of them threw for over 400 yards. What a weekend of offense.
You can't argue the quality of the game as much as I've in the previous segment Still can't believe that we can't get the 35-second clock to work. To be fair, right now, offenses are way ahead of defenses to the point that offenses have scored 24.1% of the time a touchdown in their possessions. So of their total possessions, 24% of the time, offenses are scoring a touchdown. That is way up.
I don't know if they can continue on this pace. I think eventually the defenses will start to catch up and start making some big plays as well. But some interesting stats out of this weekend. As we said, 400-yard quarterbacks, 13 touchdown passes, only 2 interceptions combined as well. They are not only throwing for a lot of yards, they're protecting the ball well. Levi Mitchell only had 287 yards passing, 3 touchdowns. So a pretty strong performance there as well. Maybe not as much yardage, but he looked very sharp and converted those touchdown opportunities.
Interestingly, of the 4 quarterbacks that went over 400, 2 of them lost. Chad Kelly went for 445. Davis Alexander went for 441. In that football game, that's 886 yards of passing that went down. That was a great football game to watch. That was so much fun. Hamilton, Winnipeg, Zach Collaros goes 421. Under a Tommy Condell offense, not unusual, but also it's very unusual for a Winnipeg team that really relies on a good mix of running and passing. And Trevor Harris goes for 417 against the British Columbia Lions. There's your 4. Now, if you want to go back to 1995, which is where we started with all of this, the 4 that did it that weekend were Doug Flutie. This is 3rd and the 6th. And like you said, there's so many more games that were being played. But Doug Flutie went for 405, then Ken Austin, 459, Matt Dunnigan, 437, Danny McManus, 409. I believe all of those are Hall of Famers.
They are. This is very high-level quarterbacking that we're seeing to start this season, and I'm excited to see where it goes. I think there's at least 8 solid starters. We had questions last week about Chad Kelly and rust, given how long it has been since he's been playing in a meaningful game. There didn't look to be a lot of rust out there. He came out firing, hit receivers, made big plays, and is right up there, I think, with a lot of the other quarterbacks in the league. This could be a race to see multiple quarterbacks over that 5,000-yard mark by the end of the season.
Which would be great. I would love to see that because it just generates more interest. And you could tell with the crowds over the weekend that attendance went way up. Now, granted, it was Saskatchewan defending Grey Cup champions and Winnipeg, who's been there quite a bit. Oh, you can't miss them if they're going to be like this. Let's go to red zone efficiency, which is, we'll call it the 20 in. That's 61.4% wind up in touchdowns. Defenses right now are really far behind. And even 2 and outs per game are at 5.67. That's 23% of total possessions. So you're actually scoring more touchdowns on your possessions than you are going 2 and out. That's just a ridiculous stat.
And I think we have to also quantify that with the opening weekend game in Ottawa with the terrible weather. That bogged things down a little bit. So I think that lowers and skews the stats negatively. That's where you get some of those 2 and outs, some of that less stellar quarterback play because of how bad the weather was. You say that one's a bit of an outlier. The numbers are even higher. And for quarterbacks to throw for over 400 yards on the losing side, you don't see that very often. The question is, where does the defense start to step up? Where do you start to see those big plays being made, and who's going to come crashing down to earth?
It's incumbent upon these defensive coordinators to figure this out. Last 3 minutes matter. 14 lead changes per game. Teams are competitively balanced. As you say, the outliers, Edmonton, Ottawa. Take them out of the equation, and those numbers all go up. Yards per game, net offense, on average, is over 800. 35-second clock aside, these offenses are doing something special. They are putting together amazing numbers. It sort of goes back to that 1990-91 era, 92 maybe, where the CFL set records for scoring in football games.
Even going back to that Edmonton-Ottawa game, all 6 games so far this season, in the final 3 minutes, one team trailed by 8 points or less with the ball in their hand. So every single game was an opportunity to either come back to tie or take a lead in the final 3 minutes. Now, there was multiple possessions. We saw some additional scores. That Toronto-Montreal game went back and forth. There was a key block punt for a touchdown. Looked like Montreal pulled away. Toronto comes back, gets a touchdown, gets back within 7. Hamilton, Winnipeg, again, Winnipeg had the ball down by 7. They didn't convert. Hamilton comes back, ends up winning by 10. So it's looks a little bit skewed. But every single team was in every game going into those final 3 minutes. That's what you want to see. And this is the parity that we've been hoping for many seasons.
And that's really important. You want everybody in this league to be competitive, and you want the game to be exciting at the finish. Anecdotally, I believe the Saskatchewan BC game averaged over 500,000 people watching it from start to finish. Peak times, obviously, it went over that. That's really good for this time of the year. It also shows you how much that rivalry, because of the West Final last year, matters. The Toronto-Montreal game also did extremely well in terms of viewership because Chad Kelly, a major draw. Everyone was curious to see how he would do. And other than a few miscues with Mackay Polk, he had a few miscues. Other than those, and we could see some of the intensity with Chad Kelly when that happened. The Argonauts don't take them lightly. What they showed Montreal was that they're a contending football team, and Chad Kelly stays healthy. That Toronto team is going to be scary.
I'd also like to highlight the excellent level of play of Canadian receivers so far this season. We've seen Tyson Philpott with the Montreal Alouettes make incredible catches around and over defenders. Kean Schaefer-Baker, I had some questions in the offseason about his durability, but wow, when he is in the lineup as the aerodynamic, he had well over 100 yards receiving, some great explosion plays for the Saskatchewan Roughriders. Nick Dembski continues to catch the bombs from Zach Collaros for big chunks of yardage as well. Curly Gittens Jr. contributed this past weekend. Sam Emelis, we want to go there with Saskatchewan, 3 touchdown catches as well. This is one of the best groups of Canadian receivers, I believe, that we've seen in a long time as well.
And you're not even talking about Keandre Smith, who went off against Winnipeg in that football game. Yes, the Canadian content of the CFL is doing wonders. And let's not forget the quarterback in BC that did amazing things. And even Trey Ford got a chance in Winnipeg. And smart thinking by Scott Milanovich, bringing him out in a critical situation in the fourth quarter, time expiring. What do you do? Well, you put Trey Ford out there. All of a sudden, Winnipeg's like, what's going on? Was he going to run? Is he going to throw? What's he going to do? And it worked out beautifully.
That was great strategy by Scott Milanovich. They were trying to run down the clock. We saw some great running earlier on in the game as well. But all of a sudden, you put Trey Ford out there. You've got 2 very capable runners in this game. And it was a decision time for Winnipeg to try to figure out what to do. Trey Ford ran off a game-clinching run.
With that win, the East now versus the West, it's tied at 1-1. And I know it's way early, but I kind of thought that this year would be a saw-off, 50-50, that half the games would go to the East, half the games would go to the West. And listening to Keandre Smith on the sideline, when he said, you haven't seen the best of us yet. I love that. The Ticats clearly were fuming after losing to Montreal in overtime. They wanted to get back at somebody, and it happened to be Winnipeg. And I did talk about when we were sort of prognosticating about the game. Winnipeg is a slow start at home. I don't know why, but they are. And it caught them this time.
It did. And I think we need to also highlight Liam Dobson, Brandon Revenberg, and that Tiger Cats offensive line. We saw Jake Serezna and Willie Jefferson in week 1 combine for 4 sacks, a couple of pass knockdowns. They were silent in the game against the Hamilton Tiger Cats. Tony Jones got home a couple times on Bo Levi Mitchell, but we did not see really much from Serezna and Jefferson at all. Hamilton obviously had a game plan to keep those 2 players in check, allow Bo Levi Mitchell to find the time to throw the ball, and that was very, very successful. And the addition of Larry Roundtree, the third, running the ball for 124 yards. This is something that's been lacking for the Tiger Cats in previous seasons, but they seem to have developed a run game to go along with Mitchell's arm.
The Tiger Cats showed everybody that they are what they were last year and maybe even better, even with all the defections to Edmonton along their offensive line. And there was a comment that I heard prior to this week's games, and I thought this was very astute. You don't let anybody go in free agency unless you've got someone behind them that's ready to take over. And the Tiger Cats were not happy about losing who they lost to Edmonton. The people they picked up and the people that were in the stable ready to go have done well.
They have. The Bombers kept Kenny Lawler in check. Again, you want to key on big players and not let them beat you. 3 targets, 2 catches for 17 yards. You think a team does that, they're pretty happy with their performance against an offense. Carrick Wheatfall, 3 catches for 102 yards. Keandre Smith, as you mentioned, 2 touchdowns, 92 yards receiving. They spread the ball around well and really made Winnipeg pay for it.
The other part of Lawler and why he's getting the big money is that everybody on the defense turns their eyes towards him wherever he lines up. And he did get a pass interference call in the end zone. So that helps Hamilton get 7 points as well. But what he does is he allows other guys that are receiving to have big nights. So what do? Pick your poison. Do you want to not double up Kenny Lawler and see what happens to you? And they had a couple of shots with him and they just missed. Or do you double and maybe triple team him, shade the safety over to that side, and risk Keandre Smith, Carrick Wheatfall?
It was a tough night for free agent Jonathan Moxey coming over to Winnipeg. I think he was matched up often with Carrick Wheatfall and was getting burned out there. So a little bit of concern on a highly touted free agent coming to help shore up the defense.
And I liked what Hamilton did with Carrick Wheatfall because remember, in that overtime game, week 1, he was the guy that fumbled the ball, was apoplectic, sitting on the bench afterwards for a long time. He felt so bad. Coaches gave him an opportunity. He said, okay, you want to take that bad feeling and make it a good one? Go out there and prove yourself. And he did.
And it has to be concerning for Winnipeg. 2 games in a row now, they have given up over 100-yard touchdown drive against a team when you're trying to keep the game close or claw your way back in it. It eats up a lot of minutes with your defense on the field and a lot of yardage when you're watching the other team march down that far.
You could argue that with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. You could argue that with the BC Lions, the Saskatchewan Roughriders, the Montreal Alouettes, the Toronto Argonauts. Teams are getting long drives. The one that amazes me still is the Vernon Adams one where they start at their 8. He gets sacked twice and they still go down the field and score a touchdown against Winnipeg. Winnipeg's deficiencies are in their secondary. They've taken so many hits over the last few years and they just haven't got the humanity there. They can figure out what they need to be. I don't care what anybody says. Adam Bighill is still being felt as a repercussive loss in that defense. He was such a field general out there. Even if they were in trouble, he would get you out of trouble.
And not only that, but Brandon Alexander is the safety as well. Those were 2 veteran presence in the middle of that Bombers defense that had seen everything, done everything, and there was no surprises to them. They did a lot of direction. Bighill, as you mentioned, I think with the defensive line and the linebacking core, and Alexander helping out with making sure the defensive backs were where they were supposed to be. As much as Winnipeg's kept the core together, there was a couple of key cogs in the wheel that have moved on that take a long time to recover from.
And for Winnipeg, we talk about them getting older and stuff like that. But one of the things that, let's not forget, they grabbed a whole swack of free agents last year. I believe it was 6. None of them are on the roster this year. I think in a Mike O'Shea system, it takes a while to get in tune with what he's expecting of you. They've got certain principles that they want to follow. They certainly on defense want to make it second and long. That's their goal. They want to do everything in first down so that they can drop 8 or 9 against you on second down. And when they're not doing that, that's when they start to run into trouble.
Key receivers they've added in Tommy Neild and Tim White have fit right in and shown a lot of comfort with Zach Collaros. Tommy Neild had a great game, several big catches, and we're seeing that connection. The defensive side of the ball, they need to start waking up quick. They can't afford to be giving up 30-some points a game and hoping Collaros can lead that offense to outscore. But that's a tall ask. And as I said, I think defenses will start to catch up. Winnipeg's has some big strides to make to get there.
So do the Saskatchewan Roughriders. So do the BC Lions. Calgary Stampeders, Toronto Argonauts, Montreal Alouettes. Everybody's given up relative to what their defensive coordinator would say is too much. They're giving up too many points. Anytime you're broaching 30, defenses are going to be scratching their heads like, what have we done here?
Yeah, you're exactly right. I think there isn't a defensive coordinator that's happy with the results from this past weekend. Now, offensively, I think we need to also look at Trevor Harris. We had been critical in the past about his inability to find the end zone or to take a game on his back in the dying minutes, but we've seen, and he delivered that in Mosaic Stadium this past week with that winning touchdown drive late in the game to topple the BC Lions.
The Rough Riders as a whole, I really thought that given the emotion of the circumstance that they were in, they had just received their rings earlier in the week. They had a lot of chatter around the stadium, even though Corey Mason said that's then, this is now. The players couldn't help but look up at the scoreboard and see Grey Cup montages, see the banner for the 2025 win being unfurled. A lot of callbacks to that game against Montreal. That is distracting. And how emotional can you get up for this? And given that the BC Lions were looking for bear when they came into Regina, they wanted to leave Regina with Saskatchewan licking their wounds. And the Riders came out and led them by 14, which just shocked me. BC looked like they were the team that had sort of not caught up to what the season is doing right now. They settled down. They got comfortable again. Nathan Rourke took it on himself and made some runs. I don't like a guy making $750 doing that. I really would rather a running back take on, but he did challenge that defense and he did succeed. And that one mosh pit that got pushed into the end zone with him in the pile, and he's just hanging on for dear life and hoping his helmet doesn't fly off. He gets into the end zone. This is a guy, and if ever BC was dumb enough to want to trade him, I'd be the first in line. I don't care. Push the money truck up to that door. Let's get him.
I think there's 8 other teams in the league that would be happy to land Nathan Rourke at this point. The other quarterback we haven't talked about much yet from this past weekend is now 13-0 as a starter during the regular season, and Davis Alexander. They did get some help from special teams with that punt block touchdown as well, but Davis Alexander just wins games when he's out there as the starting quarterback.
And I love his attitude. Every time he's asked about it, he said, that's not a streak because I lost the Grey Cup. He's really focused on what needs to be done. And that is you have to continue with your trajectory and continue with your growth. For the first time, at least that I could tell, he came out of that game without a limp. Davis Alexander, there's that, whether it's checkers, marbles, you name it, he is going to take you to town, and he's not backing down from anybody. And he was taunting the Argonauts bench. He was putting them to sleep. He was doing all kinds of razzing things towards them. He just doesn't back down from anything.
I was a little bit concerned. He took a hard hit and it looked like the back of his head bounced off the turf. I was a bit concerned if the concussion protocol was going to have a look at that and maybe pull him for a few plays. He seemed to recover well and came back to continuing to perform at a high level. You're right, he does not back down. Both he and Nathan Rourke, that can be a bit of a detriment if you're sticking your nose in there and not always making the smart play, but trying to gain that extra yard.
Going back to that play that you talked about when he did get his helmet smashed off the field, he came up with a bit of a limp. And I wondered, and I even said this to my wife at the time, if that was a deflection. Nobody focus on what happened upstairs. Well, I'll pretend that my leg is sore so that I can buy time so these spotters don't bother with me. Players, in spite of everything that they're taught about protocols and protecting yourself, they want to stay on the field and play no matter what. And they've got guiles too. They know how to get through things and make it appear that this is bothering them when actually that was.
I've seen quarterbacks pulled off for a lot less than that. It looked like a pretty hard hit. And I'm a bit surprised that somebody in the replay center or somebody involved in player safety didn't flag that and for precautionary reasons pull him for a couple of plays.
Third down.
The first 4-game week of the CFL season kicks off on Friday, June 19th, with the BC Lions in Hamilton taking on the Tiger Cats. The road BC Lions are a 1.5-point favorite in Hamilton. Who are you picking in this one?
After what I saw of Hamilton in Winnipeg and the way they handled the Blue Bombers in front of a sold-out Princess Auto Stadium, I like the Tiger Cats at home. They were smart enough after losing to the Montreal Alouettes. Tie Cats are going into this game healthy. So are the Lions, for what it's worth. BC traditionally gives Hamilton fits in Hamilton. I don't know why, but they just do. Some of the greatest games have been between these two teams going toe-to-toe. But I like the Tie Cats beating the cover. At 1.5, it's a pick 'em. It's basically, how can you go wrong, but you have to pick somebody. And I'm going to pick the Hamilton Tiger Cats only because they're at home.
The Tie Cats could be my nemesis this year. I pick them to lose in week 2, they win. I pick them to win in week 1, they lose. This week, I'm picking them to lose again. I think the BC Lions left a lot out there against the Saskatchewan Roughriders. Should be a close and exciting game as well, and I expect another high-flying offensive performance. I don't think the defenses are catching up just yet. If you're betting over-under, hammer the over, but I'm taking the BC Lions to pull into Hamilton and beat the home team.
Yeah, the over-under is 58.5 in this game. That's a 29 points apiece.
Game 2, a couple of 0-1 teams when the Toronto Argonauts take on the Ottawa Red Blacks. Again, we talk about a pick 'em and a close first game. This one is a 0.5-point favorite leaning towards the home team, Ottawa by 0.5 point. This one is too close to call.
Normally, there's a trend between the several of the betting sites. This one is one's one way, one's the other for the exact same amount. For the sake of argument, because Ottawa is the home team, we're just going to amalgamate into a 0.5-point favorite for the Red Blacks. I'm going with the Argonauts. What they did against the Alouettes, and especially the journey that the Argonauts are on with the World Cup happening the way it is, home games being in other stadiums, this team is going to be battle-tested and ready. Ottawa, to me, made so many fundamental mistakes against the Elks. They just don't seem to be together as a team. If I told you it's going to be Jake Mayer versus Chad Kelly, 9 times out of 10, who do you think is going to win that game?
I'm taking Chad Kelly 9 times out of 10, and this week is no different. I like the Argonauts, and you're right, you talk about their difficult home schedule with 3 home games on the road. They have to pick up wins where they can to stay in the East, and this is an opportunity for them to do so against the Red Blacks. Ottawa is coming off of a bye. They've had a chance to reevaluate what happened in week 1. I don't think they're there yet either. I was really impressed with that Toronto offense. I think they keep rolling, taking the road team again. Toronto wins this one against Ottawa.
54.5 is the over-under. I'll take the over. Thank you. You want a prop bet? What are the odds that it's not raining in Ottawa?
A rain game. Yeah, bet on rain in this one as well. It seems to be a rainy June in our nation's capital.
It's a rainy every time Ottawa plays at home, it seems.
Game 3, Saturday triple header in the CFL. The second Saturday game is the home opener for the Edmonton Elks. Davis Alexander and the Montreal Alouettes come to town as 3.5-point favorites on the road against Cody Fajardo and the Edmonton Elks.
Ooh, this one is, to me, the most fascinating of the games on Saturday because you've got Davis Alexander on 13 straight. You got Cody Fajardo and the Elks riding high, and they want to do something at home. And Justin Rankin was asked, could you do a double, 1,000, rushing and receiving? How do you stop this guy? The Alouettes defense still is a little bit suspect, but I think it's going to get better as time goes on. The nice thing about the Alouettes is they're playing consecutive weekends. Edmonton is close, but I like the Alouettes with the cover on this one. The Alouettes 3.5-point favorites. Edmonton's going to give them a lot, but I don't know if they'll win.
I believe this is the second year in a row that Edmonton has their home opener against the Montreal Alouettes. Davis Alexander pulled up lame in that game last year. I was in attendance at Commonwealth Field and saw that live in front of me. Alexander looks healthy. This is a real test early for the Edmonton Elks. They won that game against the Ottawa Red Blacks in week 1. We don't quite know what Ottawa is given their new coach, different starting quarterback, lots of moving parts there. Edmonton was big on the continuity from last year to this, and they need to show that they are a full team ready to play. I'm with you on this one as well. I think I like the Montreal Alouettes, given what we've seen from Davis Alexander, Tyson Philpott, go down the list. That Montreal team seems ready and on the same page. I like Montreal. Again, so far, 3 road teams for me. Will it be 4 in a row with the final game of the weekend? Saskatchewan against Vernon Adams and the Calgary Stampeders. Defending Grey Cup champions are a 1.5 favorite on the road as well.
That's a pick 'em. Calgary's got injury problems, but they're starting to get healthy. Is Reggie Bagleton coming back in the lineup? Is Florin Ormolati back in the lineup? Jalen Hutchings back in the lineup? They are healthy, and they weren't against Winnipeg, and they almost won that game. If they are healthy, then I like the Stampeders at home. The Rough Riders, emotionally, they're going to be a little bit down after the big game against the BC Lions, and this could leave them a little bit ripe. And the Stamps, of course, they've had the bye. They're going to be rested and ready. Remember, too, now granted, Winnipeg took care of this, but this was the other team that the Stampeders swept in 2025 with the Saskatchewan Roughriders. Riders didn't have an answer for them. Winnipeg found a way to get through the losses that they suffered the year before. Will Saskatchewan do the same? I'm not sure.
I am going a clean sweep of road teams this week. I think Saskatchewan showed a well-oiled offense in their home opener against the BC Lions. I think they keep rolling on that. Some impressive receiver performances. AJ Ouellette hasn't really found his legs yet. He wasn't a huge factor in that game, but I think he's ready to contribute as well. I'm taking the Riders minus the 1.5.
Well, one of us is going to be smiling at the end of the weekend.
We saw a clean sweep of road teams in week 1. I believe we're going to see it again. Road teams have a big advantage so far early this season.
They do. It's an odd stat. Road teams have won the preponderance of games. Does it continue? I just think home field has to matter for something, doesn't it?
Third Down Gamble uses the expert resources of the Canadian Football League and 3 Down Nation. For up-to-date, insightful statistics and analysis, please visit cfl.ca and 3downnation.com. The CFL on CBC theme music is used with written permission from the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation.
Thank you for listening to our show. Third Down Gamble is hosted on Podbean. Follow us on Twitter, where our handle is @ThirdDownGamble. Join us again next time. The Third Down Gamble Podcast. Audio worth watching.